Well, hello, I'm Pastor Michael at Columbus Evangelical Church, and this video is a tutorial for running our ProPresenter 7 program that does all the display lyrics during a regular Sunday service. So this is going to go over just operating ProPresenter. You come in on a Sunday morning, someone volunteered you or voluntold you to help us run some slides. Thank you. This video will help give you that process and help you kind of get a grasp of how ProPresenter works, the basics of it. So let's get started. Now, getting started, ProPresenter, usually on the desktop, just click it, and it takes a while to get started. So don't panic. And this version is 7.71 that we're working with right now. All right, so ProPresenter is started. When it starts up, it'll look hopefully something along these lines. And the first thing that you can do is you can kind of see from the left side, this shows us our playlists, and these for us are the different services here. You can see at the time of filming, you've got November 28th or the 5th of December, or the 12th, and it goes back in time. There's tons and tons of services back there, but you'll want to go in and just find whatever service you are trying to run that particular week, and you'll just click on that weekend. Hopefully it's already the service. If you come in the morning, hopefully it's already set up and on, and the computer's ready to go, and it'll be already set up on that service. So you'll make sure you're on the right week. And then right now you can see I'm clicking different weeks, but this center display area are the slides you're currently working with. And you notice that it's not changing. And the reason why it's not changing is you just need to click on some sort of slide inside of that slideshow. So when you click on the different weeks, it shows you what's inside there, different songs, different setups for those services. So let's work with November 28th. Here we go. And I want to click on one of these service songs. So I'm going to click on the song on the inside right here. I clicked it, it took a second, and then it loaded up. And I can scroll up and down and see all the elements inside of that service. If for some reason you want these actual screen items here, these preview slides, smaller or bigger, you can always click this little bar down here and make them smaller or bigger if you can't hardly see them. But we'll just keep it kind of somewhere in the middle. So as I scroll up and down on here, I can scroll up and down over here, and I can see all the different songs and elements in this service. And they're in this same order that's over here on the left side. Kind of a little preview for you. You can even take these elements on the left, and if I wanted to skip ahead or go to a particular song like Give Thanks, I could click on Give Thanks, and boom, it would take me right to that point in the service. And as you're clicking through slides, and I'm going through different slides, you'll notice when I get to this next song and it starts the next song, it highlights where I'm at in the service. And I go down and make it to the end of this song, blank slide, and then I go to, say, the sermon notes, and there it is on sermon notes. And so you can see that it shows you where you're at in the service with that gray bar, or you can click on a particular element to go there. And these purple bars are just to help you navigate. They're just to help organize the service structure so that you know main welcome announcements, main worship set, call to worship, sermon notes, and then the pre-service and post-service slides. So with that in mind, that's a little bit of this left half of the screen. Now, if you've ran something like PowerPoint before, you might be sort of familiar with some of the elements on ProPresenter, but sort of not. ProPresenter is different than PowerPoint. It's different than maybe what you've used before to do slides, even like Google Slides or any of those. And the reason is it's set up with customizable layers. What layers? So like if you ever did like Bob Ross way back in the day, his painting shows, and you watch him, he'd paint the background, then he'd paint the object on top of the background, and then he'd build up these layers of paint. In each layer, he'd work from the background to the foreground. He'd work from what's in the very back to what's in front. And those layers would be built up Same as like how a cheeseburger is built up with different layers and you can choose pickles or no pickles. So there's this concept of layers. And what we're seeing here on this upper right hand corner is a preview of what's being displayed on, in this case, the screen output. And if I was to click on some slides, you would see that, oh, here's what's going on. But you notice that there's these different elements in these different slides. And they look a little bit different. And the reason is, basically, you have layers. So right now there is a media layer right here, and then there is a slide layer on top of it. So if I was to clear the media, you'd notice that the background disappeared. Or if I was to be sliding around, clicking around, and I said, oh, I want to clear the slide, you notice it's just the lyrics that disappear. And with each one of these slides, each one of these different slides, we'll call them slides, in here that you're working through, they might change one element, one piece of the layer, or they might control and change multiple pieces of the layer at each click of transition. So when it comes to the background, this first slide, oftentimes in a song, for example, will set the background loop, and that'll be one element of the slide that's moving. It'll set the background, right? Bob Ross, he paints the background first, and then he paints some of the foreground stuff on top of it. And it's actually these foreground, the things in front, that slide portion that's changing with every click. And why that becomes significant, where that becomes confusing. If I was to click and have our pre-service slideshow going on. Now the pre-service slideshow, it rolls through, it's awesome, it's great. And then I was to go and click this first slide right here, and wait, and then I click the words and they're not, what's happening? Nothing's displaying on the screen. Well, what's happening here is you're seeing this whole concept of there being layers playing out. And what's happening is basically there is an announcement layer right here that goes over the top of every other layer. So basically the foreground is covering up all the stuff in the background. And even though you're changing through these slides, you're noticing that you're not actually seeing the elements. Now, if I was to get rid of that top layer, oh, there it is right there. I got rid of the announcement section here. You can see this is background to foreground, the layers. And when I had that announcement slide, it was just covering up. If I clear the announcements, those slides were in the background the whole time. And so where this becomes significant is ideally the whole slide show, the whole service will be set up for you. It'll be ready to go. But if you skip slides during the service, if you jump around and say you don't click this first slide, oftentimes things can get a little wonky because the layers can get all kind of jumbled up. And so what you'll want to make sure you do is that you just hit every slide going through. Even if you have to like skip ahead, if you're in a song, you'll kind of get used to it. As you get more familiar, this part I'm going to explain right now gets a little less confusing. After doing a service, you'll probably be pretty comfortable with it. But you do want to make sure you hit every slide, because sometimes, say in this first slide, there might be background music that starts playing. Or there might be some sort of other cue that's built into that slide. So you'll just want to make sure you try to hit every slide. That's one of the core things that'll really help you out when you're doing the ProPresenter for one of the services. The other element, the other tip right from the get-go that will really help you is if you just make sure that you advance the slides before the end of whatever lyrics are on the slide. So for example, we'll go to Emmanuel. So Emmanuel, his name is called Emmanuel. God with us, revealed in us. So when we're singing this song, I might be singing God with us, revealed, and before we even finish that verse, in us, I'm going to go to the next slide. I'm going to go like right before the end of the words are up there, because what ends up happening is everyone in the room has already read the lyrics that are there. They already know they're going to be singing in us. What they don't know is the next verse. And usually there's a little delay, especially with hymns. Sometimes people just don't remember all the words, all the different verses. Like, what was verse 4 of Amazing Grace? Okay, yeah. So sometimes we forget exactly the lyrics that are there. And so you'll want to make sure you put those lyrics up on the slide before people need to sing them. So it's a good one. His name is called, I'm going to just click to the next slide, Emmanuel, as we're singing that last verse. And this is something that you kind of get used to. It takes a little bit of practice. You kind of have to be thinking as you're advancing the slides. If you're just singing, a lot of times you'll be a little delayed, where give thanks with a grateful heart. Oh wait, I forgot to, and then there's that little bit of a pause, and you'll know when it happens because there'll be a little pause where the room will get a little quiet and people will be like, thanks to the Holy One. They'll miss that, maybe that first word, because the lyrics were just a little bit behind. So you kind of want to put the lyrics up there a little bit early. If there's a big long verse, give thanks because he's given Jesus Christ, and then I would at that advance it his son, because people already have those last two words in their mind. So that's one concept with just advancing the slides that helps, and kind of taking to mind this different idea of layers. The slideshow, especially if you're doing the second service, it's going to be all set up exactly the way you need it. The words and the lyrics are all going to be in the right order. You're just going to need to advance through the different slides. And you can do that by clicking on them individually, or you can press spacebar. Yeah. Or you can press arrow key forwards and backwards, right? So those are different ways that you can advance the slides. When you get to the end of a verse like this one, the blank slide there, and then I hit spacebar, you'll notice that it doesn't immediately switch to this right here. It actually clicks on the actual name of the song right there is technically a slide, and then it'll go to the first one. So when you go between songs, you kind of have to click twice to get to that first slide. And that's similar to, for example, on this welcome slide. You're going along, we did Samaritan's Purse. It counts this main worship set as a slide, then count your blessings, a slide, and then that first one. So sometimes you just got to like hit that spacebar a couple times, or you can just make sure you click each one of the block slide elements as we're going through a service. That's the basics of it. I mean, basically you're just following along with the songs, and when it comes to the actual sermon notes, sometimes there's lyrics up there, sometimes there's images up there, sometimes with the sermon notes there are Bible verses. As you can see with this last sermon I preached, it was on Ruth, and then we had some extra outside of Ruth passages that were included, and we put those up on the screen just so that people, as they're reading through Ruth, could look up and see the cross-reference verses that we were talking about. And those verses, when it comes to the sermon notes that I usually print out, my style, as you're going through the sermon, I'm looking for one in here. I know there's one in here. Here's one. So oftentimes I have it where you'll see it says in bright yellow with a slide. That means that's when that slide comes up. And obviously Leviticus right there. And oftentimes I will even mention, as you can see on the slides, and I'll kind of cue it up. So hopefully it's not too bad, but I typically print out my notes so that way you can follow along and see exactly ahead of time when those slide transitions happen. And after we would read that those lyrics right there, you just clear them out and go back to the regular Ruth slide screen. So that's kind of how that would work with the sermon notes themselves. Josh sometimes doesn't have his slides printed out the same way, but he oftentimes will cue those slides for you as well, so that it should be pretty easy to follow along with the sermon notes part of it. So basically, a typical service, kind of running through a typical service. It would start with these pre-service slides right here. This is what would be going on during the service beforehand. And you notice that there is these different triggers up here. There's a 9 a.m. and an 11 a.m. trigger. Those are our two typical Sunday services. And if I was to click the trigger button here, it would start the countdown to 9 a.m. And I'm filming this at 9:44, so it's long ways out, right? But if I was to trigger 11 a.m., you'd notice it's 74 minutes away. And so before the first service, if you want that countdown to trigger, all you got to do is click that trigger button right here, and it'll automatically set the countdown timer. That countdown timer will disappear when it reaches 0. That whole process has been programmed for you. All you have to do is hit trigger for 9 a.m. or trigger for 11 a.m. And these slides will rotate through, and then these slides will rotate through. And then when it comes time to start the service, you'll click on this first slide right here. And that slide will typically have a clear all on top of it. And that's a little command in here, and that's the same thing as hitting this clear all over here and clearing out the screens and starting that first slide. If you ever get, if at any point you kind of get mixed up and the layers are all messed up, you can individually clear them out over here, or you can hit a clear all and kind of clean the slate and go to the different slides if it ever gets really messy on you or something gets messed up. But that's kind of how the beginning of the service would work. That's the first element of the services. Whenever there's this little green bar right here, and you see it on these two elements in the service, that means that it's going to completely overlay the online live stream. They won't see the video feed, they'll only see that. And I know that's like, wait, the online live stream, what's going on? So automatically, when you're running ProPresenter, it will automatically format all of these different elements on the live stream. So you control all the lyrics in the room and on the live stream. And so if you're on top of it in the room, it will automatically do all the hard work for you, and it will all be formatted correctly on the live stream as well. So pretty cool. Thanks for helping with our live stream service on top of our in-person service. So all that to say, basically there is typically a call to worship for our first song. And you'll just want to make sure that you hit this slide right here before the song starts. So once that timer hits 0, or sometimes the worship team gets a little anxious, they start like 30 seconds beforehand. So if they start playing, just go ahead and hit that first slide and throw up the starting lyrics. That way everybody can kind of see them and be on top of what they're about to sing. And then you'll advance through that first song. You'll get to the end of the first song. Typically, this is a moment when announcements happen. So we typically have just a welcome screen that we have up there during that time. Sometimes there's special video or a special slide or something like that right here. And whenever we cue that or start talking about it, or you can ask us questions if you have any questions about that part. If it's like, wait, what's this over here? What's Operation Christmas Child? Oh, during the service, we're going to pray over the Operation Christmas Child boxes. Oh, okay, I'm going to throw that slide on when we pray over the boxes. So after that welcome and announcements, we get into our main worship set and work through those worship sets. And that part pretty much is just straight through. It's just clicking straight through, following along with the songs. Typically there is 3 to 4 songs in this main worship set. You can see where we're at over here. So give thanks, and then we'd, whoops, see, I got us all clicked around and messed up. If you ever get messed up, you can always just click on these songs back over here to kind of get reoriented. So I'd work through, I'd get to this last blank slide. Now at this point, at the end of the main worship set, oftentimes we'll have a prayer time or communion or something like that. Occasionally there might be another slide element in here that says like communion or prayer time or something like that. You could click those slides during that time, or you can just click the Ruth slide or the blank slide. You can leave it on that during that prayer time. We're not very picky about that stuff. So during that sermon, when that sermon kicks up, you can just put that main logo on there. You can follow along with the sermon notes, either Josh's or mine, and it will help you know exactly when, like, oh, that verse is coming up or that image. The images are harder because sometimes like, when is he going to show that image or that little whatever it is. So you can, or that quote or whatnot. So you can follow along in the notes, or you can just listen and we'll probably cue it for you. Just say, hey, we're going to see this image up on the screen. Something along those lines. You can throw it up there. So we'll work through the verses. We got to the end of the sermon. There's a prayer oftentimes that transitions the end of the sermon with the last closing worship song. So we would get into this last closing worship song. The worship leader would work through that song, and at the end of it, the worship leader would give a little dismissal closing, and they'd say, all right, have a blessed week, a prayer, something like that. It's the worship leader who is 90% of the time doing this final closing dismissal. And then we would go to the post-service slides, which are usually the same slides as the pre-service slides, but they just don't have any countdown timer or anything on them like that. So that's it. You'd click this last one, and then you'd say, all right, high five the guy running video or sound or whatever, and you just successfully completed a worship service. So that is running a worship service. If you have questions about it, man, I'm usually back around here at the sound booth. You can always ask questions. If something's behaving weirdly, be sure to ask questions. But I would say 95% of the time, it is as straightforward and simple as what we just did. You just literally advance through the slides and just follow along with us. And man, it is one of those things that is so helpful during the services. So thank you so much for being willing to help us and be a part of our tech team. And if you'd like to learn more, I've got 2 more videos that get into setting up ProPresenter, how to build services like this, and what to do when things go wrong, if there is ever a mistake or error or catastrophic failure. So thank you so much, and have a great week.